Over the next few weeks, I started noticing a pattern. The fancy car pickups happened every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. And on those days, Rachel would spend extra time getting ready in the bathroom before leaving. Touch up her makeup, fix her hair, spray on some perfume. The whole 9 yards. I started wondering if maybe this was her boyfriend or something, but then why all the secrecy? Why not just introduce him to people at work? We had company parties sometimes, and she always came alone. Said she was single when people asked. But here she was, obviously seeing someone on a regular basis. The pieces started falling into place when I overheard her talking to Jessica from HR one day. They were in the copy room, and I was in the supply closet next door grabbing some folders. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls are thin and they weren't exactly whispering. I just wish things were different, Rachel was saying. This whole situation is getting complicated. Well, you knew what you were getting into, Jessica replied. These things always get messy eventually. I know. It's just hard sometimes, you know. Having to sneak around all the time. That's when it hit me. Rachel was having an affair with someone. The secrecy, the regular meetings, the fancy car, it all made sense now. The guy was probably married, which would explain why they had to be so careful about being seen together. I felt this weird mix of emotions when I realized what was going on. Part of me was disappointed in Rachel because I'd always thought she was better than that. But another part of me was curious about who the guy was and what his story was. And if I'm being totally honest, there was also this little voice in my head wondering if his wife knew what was going on. Once I figured out what was happening, I couldn't just let it go. I know that probably makes me sound like some kind of creep, but I kept thinking about this guy's wife. If my wife was cheating on me, I'd want to know, wouldn't I? Nobody deserves to be living a lie like that. Man, where do I even start with this mess? I guess I should begin with how I found out about the whole thing. My name's Tyler, and I work at this mid-sized accounting firm downtown. Nothing fancy, just pushing numbers around and trying to make ends meet like everyone else. So there's this woman, Rachel, who works in marketing on the 3rd floor. She's been there about 2 years, maybe a little longer. Pretty woman, always dressed nice, has this laugh that you can hear from across the office. I'd say hi in the elevator sometimes, but we weren't really friends or anything. Just co-workers who knew each other's names. About 6 months ago, I started noticing she was coming in late more often. Not super late, but like 15, 20 minutes past 9 when she used to be one of those early birds who'd beat me to the office. I didn't think much of it at first, everyone has their rough patches, right? Maybe she was having car trouble or something. But then I started seeing her having these hushed phone conversations by the break room. You know how it is when someone's trying to be quiet but you can still tell something's up. She'd be all giggly and whispering, then she'd see someone coming and suddenly switch to talking about work stuff real loud. Classic behavior of someone who's got something to hide. The thing that really caught my attention though was when I saw her getting picked up after work one day. I was staying late to finish up some quarterly reports, and I happened to look out the window around 7. There she was, getting into this fancy BMW with some guy I'd never seen before. Tall, dark hair, looked like he had money. The way she leaned over to kiss him before they drove off, that wasn't a first date kind of kiss, if you know what I mean. Now, I'm not usually one to get involved in other people's business. Live and let live, that's always been my motto. But something about the whole situation just felt off to me. Maybe it was because Rachel always seemed like such a straight-laced person, or maybe I was just bored with my own life and looking for some drama. Either way, I found myself paying more attention to her comings and goings. So I started paying closer attention to the BMW guy. I made excuses to work late on Tuesdays and Thursdays so I could watch for him. I started recognizing his car, a silver BMW 5 Series with these distinctive chrome rims. Pretty easy to spot in our company parking lot full of Hondas and Toyotas. One Thursday, I decided to follow them. I know how that sounds, and I'm not proud of it, but I had to know who this guy was. I waited until they left, then got in my car and tailed them at a distance. They went to this upscale restaurant about 15 minutes away, the kind of place where dinner for two costs more than I spend on groceries in a week. I didn't go inside or anything. I'm not that crazy. But I did write down the license plate number. My buddy Rick works at the DMV, and I figured he might be able to help me out with some information. We went to high school together, and he owed me a favor from when I helped him move last year. It took some convincing, but Rick eventually agreed to run the plates for me. This better not be some stalker thing, Jake, he warned me. I could lose my job over this. It's not like that, I assured him. I just need to know who owns the car. Trust me on this one. A few days later, Rick called me back with the information. The BMW was registered to a Michael Thompson, age 38, with an address in one of the fancy suburbs about 20 minutes from downtown. I wrote down all the details and started doing some research of my own. A quick Google search turned up quite a bit of information about Michael Thompson. Turns out he's some kind of investment banker who works for one of the big firms downtown. His LinkedIn profile showed he'd been with the same company for 12 years and had worked his way up to vice president. There were photos of him at various business events, always in expensive suits and looking very successful. But the real jackpot came when I found his Facebook profile. It wasn't completely private, so I could see some of his basic information and a few photos. And there she was, his wife, Amanda. They'd been married for 15 years according to their anniversary post from a few months ago. She was pretty in that wholesome, suburban mom kind of way. Blonde hair, big smile, looked like she probably drove a minivan and volunteered at the local elementary school. The photos on his profile painted a picture of what seemed like a perfect family. There were vacation shots from some tropical beach, pictures of them at what looked like their daughter's soccer game, shots of family barbecues in their backyard. They looked happy. Really happy. That's when the whole situation started eating at me. Here was this woman, Amanda, living her life thinking she had a faithful husband, while he was off having dinner dates with Sarah twice a week. She was posting things on Facebook about how lucky she felt to have such a wonderful husband, while he was lying to her face every single day. I started looking at their social media more regularly. Amanda would post pictures of the meals she cooked for him, talk about their date nights, which were probably the nights he wasn't with Sarah, share articles about maintaining a strong marriage. Meanwhile, Michael barely posted anything, and when he did, it was usually work-related stuff. The more I learned about them, the angrier I got. Not at Sarah, necessarily, I mean, she was doing something wrong, but at least she wasn't the one breaking marriage vows. Michael was the one who was married. He was the one who had made promises to Amanda. He was the one who was living a double life. I started thinking about Amanda more and more. What would she do if she found out? Would she leave him? Would she try to work it out? Did she have any idea what was going on? Some wives have suspicions, but others are completely blindsided when they find out about affairs. The worst part was watching Michael's social media activity. He'd post these professional shots from business dinners and networking events, acting like he was this upstanding member of the community. Meanwhile, I knew exactly what he was doing on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. I spent about 2 weeks just stewing over this whole situation. I'd find myself thinking about Amanda Thompson during my lunch breaks, wondering what kind of person she was, whether she deserved to know what her husband was up to. I'd picture her at home, maybe cooking dinner for him on the nights he was supposed to be working late, not knowing he was actually out with another woman. The thing that really pushed me over the edge was when I overheard Sarah talking to another coworker about some expensive jewelry she'd gotten as a gift. She didn't say who it was from, but I could put 2 and 2 together. This guy was spending money on gifts for his mistress, money that probably came from the family budget that his wife thought was going to legitimate expenses. I started having these imaginary conversations with Amanda in my head. I'd picture myself calling her up and explaining the whole situation. But every time I thought about actually doing it, I'd chicken out. What if I was wrong? What if Michael wasn't married after all, or what if Amanda already knew and didn't care? What if I was just stirring up trouble for no good reason? But then I'd think about my own ex-wife, Jennifer. We got divorced about 3 years ago, and while it wasn't because of cheating, I remembered how awful it felt to find out she'd been lying to me about other things. Money, mostly. She'd been hiding credit card debt and making purchases without telling me. When I finally discovered what was going on, the worst part wasn't even the money. It was realizing that someone I trusted had been deceiving me for months. If Jennifer had been having an affair, I would have wanted to know. Even if it hurt, even if it meant our marriage was over, would have wanted the truth. Living a lie is worse than dealing with a painful reality. That's when I decided I had to do something. But I also knew I couldn't just call Amanda out of the blue. That would be too shocking, too brutal. I needed to find a way to let her discover the truth gradually, so she could process it and decide what to do with the information. I started thinking about anonymous tips. You hear about them all the time. Someone sends a letter or an email without identifying themselves, just giving someone a heads up about what's going on. It seemed like the perfect solution. I could give Amanda the information she needed without getting directly involved in their personal drama. The question was how to do it effectively. I didn't want to send some vague message that could be easily dismissed. I needed to give her enough specific details that she'd know it was real, but not so much that it would be obviously coming from someone who'd been watching them closely. I decided to start with the basics. I'd let her know that her husband was having regular dinner dates with another woman, and I'd give her enough information to verify it herself if she wanted to. The restaurant they went to, the days of the week, maybe even a description of Sarah. But I wouldn't mention where I worked or how I knew any of this. The tricky part was figuring out how to contact her. I didn't have her personal email address, and calling seemed too risky. What if Michael answered the phone? I could send a letter to their house, but again, there was a chance he might get the mail first. Then I remembered that Amanda was pretty active on social media. She had Instagram and Facebook accounts that weren't completely private. I could create a fake social media account and send her a direct message. That way, she'd be the only one who saw it, and I could remain completely anonymous. I spent a whole evening crafting the message. I must have written and rewritten it 20 times, trying to find the right tone. Too casual and she might not take it seriously. Too dramatic and she might think it was from some crazy person. I needed to sound concerned but not invested, helpful but not pushy. Finally, I settled on something simple and straightforward. I'd tell her I'd seen her husband with another woman on multiple occasions, give her some basic details about when and where, and suggest that she might want to look into it. I'd emphasize that I wasn't trying to cause trouble, but that I thought she deserved to know what was going on. Creating the fake social media account was easier than I expected. I used a generic name, David Miller, and grabbed a random stock photo of some middle-aged guy for the profile picture. I made up a basic background story in case Amanda tried to check me out, but I kept it vague enough that it wouldn't be traceable back to me. I waited until a Thursday evening to send the message. I figured that would be perfect timing since Michael would be out with Sarah, so Amanda would probably be home alone and might be more likely to check her social media. I wanted her to see it when she had some time to process the information without him around. Here's what I ended up sending. Hi Amanda, I hope you don't mind me reaching out to you like this. I don't know you personally, but I've seen your husband Michael around town on several occasions, and I felt like you should know about something. I've seen him having dinner with the same woman multiple times at Romano's restaurant on Oak Street. They seem very close, if you know what I mean. This has been going on for at least a few months that I know of. The woman is brunette, probably in her late 20s or early 30s, and they usually meet on Tuesday and Thursday evenings around 7 p.m. I debated whether to tell you this, but I figured if it were my spouse, I'd want to know. I'm not trying to cause problems, just thought you deserved to be aware. You seem like a nice person from your posts, and nobody should have to deal with being lied to. I read it over about 50 times before I finally hit send. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. There was no taking it back now. In a few hours, or maybe the next day, Amanda Thompson would read those words and her whole world might change. I couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of the evening. I kept checking my fake account to see if she'd read the message, but there was no way to tell. I tried watching TV, but I couldn't focus on anything. I kept thinking about what Amanda might be doing right at that moment. Was she checking her messages? Had she seen it already? What was her reaction? The next morning, I was exhausted from staying up half the night worrying about what I'd done. Part of me regretted sending the message. What if I'd just destroyed a family? What if their marriage had problems but they were working through them? What if Amanda was the kind of person who would rather not know? But then I reminded myself why I'd done it in the first place. Michael was the one who'd made the choice to cheat. I was just making sure his wife had all the information she needed to make informed decisions about her own life. If their marriage ended because of this, it would be because of what he did, not because of what I told her. I was distracted at work all day Friday. I kept looking over at Sarah, wondering if anything had changed. Did she know that someone had figured out what was going on? Had Michael said anything to her about problems at home? But she seemed normal, same as always, chatting with coworkers and acting like she didn't have a care in the world. That evening, I checked my fake account again. Amanda still hadn't responded to the message, but I could see that she'd read it. The little seen indicator was there, showing that she'd opened it sometime that afternoon. So she knew. She'd read every word I'd written, and now she had to decide what to do with that information. I wondered what was going through her mind. Was she angry? Devastated? In denial? Some people react to news like that by immediately confronting their spouse. Others want to gather more evidence before they say anything. Some people just shut down completely and pretend they never saw the message. Part of me hoped she'd respond, maybe ask for more details or thank me for telling her. But another part of me was glad she didn't. The less communication between us, the better. I'd done what I felt I needed to do, and now it was up to her to handle the situation however she saw fit. I spent the weekend trying to act normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about what might be happening in the Thompson household. Monday morning came and I was back at work, trying to focus on my regular tasks but constantly distracted by thoughts of what might be happening with Amanda and Michael. I kept glancing over at Sarah to see if there were any signs that something had changed, but she seemed her usual self. Tuesday was normally one of Michael's date nights with Sarah. I found myself staying late again, not because I had work to do, but because I was curious to see if their routine would continue as normal. Around 6:30, I positioned myself by the window and waited. Right on schedule, the silver BMW pulled up. But something was different this time. Instead of Sarah walking out to the car with her usual spring in her step, she seemed hesitant. She stood by the passenger door for a moment before getting in, and even from the fourth floor, I could tell their conversation was tense. They drove off, but I had this feeling that things weren't going smoothly. Maybe Amanda had confronted Michael, or maybe he was just feeling guilty about the whole situation. Either way, something had shifted. The next day, Sarah called in sick. That was unusual for her. In the 2 years I'd known her, she rarely missed work. Then Thursday came, and she was back, but she looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying, and she kept checking her phone every few minutes. Thursday evening, I watched from the window again. The BMW showed up right on time, but this time Sarah didn't come out at all. Michael sat in the parking lot for about 10 minutes before driving away alone. That's when I knew for sure that something major had happened. I checked my fake social media account that night, hoping Amanda might have sent me a follow-up message, but there was nothing. However, when I looked at her regular posts, I noticed she hadn't posted anything since the day before I'd sent her the message. For someone who usually shared something every day or two, that silence spoke volumes. Friday was when things really started to unravel. Sarah came to work, but she spent most of the day crying in the bathroom. Jessica from HR had to take her into the conference room for what looked like a serious conversation. By lunchtime, word was getting around the office that Sarah was having some kind of personal crisis. I felt guilty watching her fall apart, even though I kept reminding myself that this was all consequences of choices she and Michael had made. Still, seeing someone you work with every day going through something that difficult was hard to ignore. The weekend was torture. I kept checking Amanda's social media accounts, looking for any clues about what was happening. Finally, Sunday evening, she posted something. It wasn't much, just a quote about strength and moving forward, but it was the first thing she'd shared since I'd contacted her. Monday morning brought more drama. Sarah wasn't at work, and when I casually asked Jessica if everything was okay, she just shook her head and said Sarah was dealing with some personal issues and might need to take some time off. That afternoon, I decided to drive by the restaurant where Michael and Sarah used to meet. I don't know what I expected to see, but I was curious. The place looked normal enough, just another upscale restaurant serving overpriced pasta to business types. As I was sitting in my car across the street, my phone buzzed with a notification from my fake social media account. Amanda had finally responded to my message. "Thank you for telling me," she wrote. "You were right, and I needed to know. It's been a difficult few days, but I'm dealing with it. I appreciate that you took the time to reach out, even though it must have been awkward for you." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me felt relieved that she'd handled the news as well as could be expected. But another part of me felt the weight of what I'd set in motion. This wasn't just some abstract moral principle anymore, these were real people dealing with real consequences. I typed back a simple response: "I'm sorry you had to go through this. I hope things work out for you, whatever you decide to do." She replied almost immediately, "Me too. Thanks again." That was the last direct communication we had, but it wasn't the end of the story. Over the next couple of weeks, I watched the situation spiral completely out of control. Sarah ended up taking a leave of absence from work, which left everyone wondering what had happened to her. The official story was that she was dealing with a family emergency, but those of us who'd seen her crying in the bathroom knew it was something more personal. Meanwhile, I started noticing changes in Michael's social media activity. Where he used to post occasionally about work achievements and family activities, now there was complete radio silence. His last post was from over 2 weeks ago, right around the time I'd sent that message to Amanda. Amanda, on the other hand, became much more active online. She started posting inspirational quotes about independence and self-worth. She shared articles about women starting over after divorce. Most tellingly, she changed her relationship status from "married" to "it's complicated." I could tell from her posts that she was building up to something big. There were subtle hints about people not being who they seem, about the importance of honesty in relationships, about standing up for yourself when someone betrays your trust. It was like watching someone prepare for battle. The war really started when Amanda posted a long Facebook status that didn't mention Michael by name but made it clear she was talking about him. She wrote about how she discovered that someone she trusted had been lying to her for months, and how she was done being taken advantage of. She talked about the importance of women supporting each other and not letting men get away with treating them badly. The post got dozens of comments from friends and family members offering support and asking what had happened. Amanda didn't give details, but she thanked everyone for their kind words and said she'd share more when she was ready. That's when Michael made his first mistake in handling the situation. Instead of trying to work things out privately, he responded to Amanda's post with a comment of his own. He wrote something about how there are two sides to every story, and how he hoped they could work through their differences like adults. Big mistake. Amanda screenshot his comment and shared it in a new post, asking her friends what they thought about someone who would try to minimize their partner's feelings in such a public way. The response was swift and brutal. Michael got absolutely roasted in the comments, with people calling him everything from a coward to a narcissist. Things escalated quickly from there. Michael deleted his Facebook account entirely, but Amanda kept posting. She shared more inspirational quotes, posted photos of herself looking happy and confident, and even started a blog about reclaiming your life after betrayal. I found Amanda's blog through her Facebook links and started reading her posts. She never mentioned specific details about the affair, but she wrote about the pain of discovering that your spouse has been living a double life. She talked about the humiliation of realizing that other people might have known about the cheating before she did. She described the anger that comes with finding out that family money had been spent on another woman. But the most interesting posts were the ones where she started talking about revenge. Not in a crazy, dangerous way, more like strategic, calculated payback. She wrote about how betrayal doesn't just hurt the person who was cheated on, it hurts the whole family. She talked about how the cheating partner's actions affect everyone around them, and how sometimes those consequences need to be made visible. I started to get nervous reading these posts. Amanda seemed like she was planning something, and I wondered if my anonymous message had set off a chain reaction that was going to end badly for everyone involved. My fears were confirmed when Amanda posted about hiring a private investigator. She didn't say it directly, but she wrote about how important it is to gather all the facts before making major life decisions. She mentioned that sometimes people need professional help to uncover the full extent of their partner's deception. I realized that by telling Amanda about the affair, I hadn't just given her information, I declared war on Michael's behalf. And Amanda was proving to be a much more formidable opponent than I think he'd expected. The final chapter of this whole mess played out over the course of about a month, and it was more dramatic than anything I could have imagined when I first sent that message to Amanda. The private investigator Amanda hired must have been really good at his job, because within 2 weeks, she had a complete dossier on Michael's activities. And it turned out that Sarah wasn't his only affair. The PI had uncovered evidence of at least 2 other women Michael had been involved with over the past few years. Amanda documented everything on her blog. She didn't use real names, but she provided enough details that anyone who knew Michael would be able to recognize the stories. She wrote about business trips that were really romantic getaways, about credit card charges at jewelry stores and expensive restaurants, about hotel rooms booked in other cities. The blog posts got shared extensively among Amanda's friends and family, and eventually word got back to Michael's workplace. It's one thing to have personal problems, but when those problems start affecting your professional reputation, that's when things get serious for someone in his position. Michael tried to fight back by hiring his own lawyer and threatening Amanda with defamation lawsuits, but that just made things worse. Amanda's response was to post copies of all the evidence she'd gathered, along with a statement from her lawyer explaining why everything she'd shared was legally protected speech. The situation at my office got even more uncomfortable when Sarah came back from her leave of absence. She looked like she'd lost about 15 pounds and aged 5 years in the span of a month. People were whispering about her constantly, and it was clear that word about the affair had gotten around. Sarah tried to act like everything was normal, but she was obviously struggling. She'd get emotional at random times, she was making mistakes in her work, and she kept having hushed phone conversations that would end with her crying. I felt terrible watching her fall apart, even though I kept reminding myself that she'd made her own choices. The final blow came when Amanda posted on her blog about reaching out to the other women to let them know about each other. She wrote about how she'd contacted all of Michael's affair partners to make sure they understood that they weren't the only ones, and that Michael had been lying to all of them. That's when Sarah finally broke. She came into work one Monday morning and went straight to our boss's office. She was in there for about an hour, and when she came out, she was carrying a box of her personal belongings. She'd quit, effective immediately. I never found out exactly what Amanda had said to Sarah, but whatever it was enough to make her realize that her relationship with Michael was completely hopeless. From what I gathered through office gossip, Sarah had thought she was Michael's only affair, and that he was going to leave his wife for her eventually. Finding out about the other women must have been devastating. Michael's life imploded pretty quickly after that. Amanda filed for divorce and went after everything: the house, the cars, his retirement accounts, even partial ownership of his business. Her lawyer was apparently just as ruthless as she was. and Michael found himself facing the prospect of losing most of what he'd worked for over the past 15 years. His professional reputation was shot too. Word about the affairs had spread through his industry, and while companies don't usually fire people for personal problems, they do tend to push out employees who become liabilities. Michael ended up having to resign from his position and take a much lower-paying job at a smaller firm. Amanda, meanwhile, seemed to thrive on the chaos she'd created. Her blog gained a following of women who were dealing with similar situations, and she started speaking at events about infidelity and divorce. She turned her personal disaster into a platform for helping other people, which I had to admire even if her methods were sometimes extreme. The whole thing made me think a lot about the concept of justice and revenge. When I first sent that message to Amanda, I thought I was just giving her information she deserved to have. I didn't realize I was essentially handing her a weapon that she'd use to completely destroy her husband's life. Don't get me wrong, Michael brought all of this on himself through his own actions. He chose to cheat, he chose to lie, and he chose to risk his family for some excitement on the side. But watching the systematic way Amanda dismantled his entire existence was both impressive and terrifying. Sarah eventually moved to another city and started over somewhere else. I heard through a mutual connection that she was doing better, but it took her a long time to recover from the whole experience. She'd been collateral damage in a war between Michael and Amanda, and she paid a heavy price for getting involved with a married man. As for me, I learned that sometimes doing what you think is right can have consequences you never anticipated. I still believe Amanda deserved to know the truth about her husband, but I never expected my anonymous tip to trigger such a complete and total destruction of multiple people's lives. The law of retribution, it turns out, can be more powerful than any legal system. When someone feels truly betrayed, they can find ways to make the person who hurt them pay a price that goes far beyond what any court would impose. Amanda made sure that Michael's punishment fit his crime, and then some. Looking back on the whole situation now, I'm not sure if I'd make the same choice again. But I guess that's the thing about moral decisions, you can't always predict where they'll lead, and sometimes the right thing to do creates more problems than it solves. All you can do is act according to your principles and hope that the consequences, whatever they are, serve some greater good in the end.